Welcome to the eShopper Reviews Podcast, episode 30. This is the podcast for September 2023, and I'm Jenn Ip.
And I'm Jake McNeil.
For those new to this podcast, eShopper Reviews was previously a subreddit on reddit.com where Jake reviewed games on Nintendo platforms with over 2,300 reviews. However, we are currently in transition to a new home, and in the meantime, you can find all of our new reviews on our Patreon, which you can find at patreon.com/eShopperReviews. And on that note, all of our content is supported by the kind donations of our Patreon patrons. This month's sponsors are Ben, Andy Miller, Xleen, Homer Simpin, Johannes, Talisa, Francis Ops, Gabriel Coronado Medina, Ilya Zarev, Jared Wark, Christopher Wolf, and Seth Christianfeld. Thank you all for helping to keep the reviews coming. Now, we'll talk about the patron-voted games.
This month, we actually had clear winners, at least as of this recording. Again, we always record early, so there's entirely the possibility that new votes will come in between now and the end of the month. But at least as it stands now, we have one game that was the most voted in both the standard vote and the all-patron budget vote.
So, the winner for the standard vote is WrestleQuest.
As of this recording, I believe this game has not come out yet. So when the game comes out, I will snatch it up and review it as quickly as I can. Have you heard of this one, Jen?
No, I'm not really into wrestling games.
I'm not big into wrestling, but sometimes a wrestling game will come along and it's just really good and hard to ignore. Like back on the Nintendo 64 era, there were 2 or 3 that were just amazing. And even not being a wrestling guy, I'm like, okay, this is just fun. WrestleQuest, as I understand it, is not going to be at all like those games. Instead, this is a wrestling RPG where, you know, I believe it's even like turn-based where you're selecting your moves out of menus and stuff. And I'm sure they have this big flamboyant story like you get out of, you know, pro wrestling and stuff. I think it's a really interesting idea. I'm curious to see where they take it. And in particular, not being a wrestling fan myself, I wonder how much it'll speak to me. I'm not the kind of person who's especially likely to get any like little in-jokes or references, but maybe I'll catch some, like if they make, you know, a reference to, you know, can you smell what The Rock is cooking, or, you know,
God,
Hollywood Hulk, or, you know, any of the big stuff that us mainstream casuals know about.
I remember a friend describing wrestling as opera for men, in a way.
Yeah, it's like a soap opera with grunting and
violence.
Dudes in their underwear. Well, dudes and ladies in their underwear, I should specify.
Yeah. Well, the winner for the all-patron budget vote is Escape Lala, retro point-and-click adventure.
Like with the usual with the budget games, I don't really know anything about this one. Obviously, I expect it to be a point-and-click style, like, graphic adventure game. But beyond that, can't really say much about it yet until I review it. So I guess we'll see if it's good.
Okay, so next month will be interesting for the vote, and I'm kind of freaking out here at the list of... So next month's vote is the 2023 Indie Game Extravaganza.
So I decided to do something a little different for the September vote, which is I realized that there aren't a heck of a lot of games, like really major titles, that I could include in this vote that I haven't already included in other votes, or that aren't just going to draw all the attention. Like I know that I think it's coming up in October, Super Mario Bros. Wonder comes out. And I also realized, looking through the list of games that have come out for the Nintendo Switch in 2023, there are a lot of games that have gotten pretty good reviews on other platforms. Like if you look at Metacritic reviews on PlayStation, or if you look at Steam reviews, a lot of these games are really well liked, but they just haven't really gotten many reviews on the Nintendo Switch platform. So I have here a list of 40 games. Jen, if you want, I can speed run it.
Sure.
Okay. You will probably not recognize most of the games that are on this list.
I'm not recognizing any of these from this list.
Yeah. And that's just it, is they are all indie games. These games are all $20 or less. And I will have this vote 3 times over the course of the next month. One time will be only for $5 and up patrons. One time will be for any patrons who donated. And one time will be for everyone, regardless of how much they donated or didn't donate, if you didn't donate anything. And I'm going to combine all 3 of these and come back with at least 3 winners. Which means if you donate $5 or more, you can participate in all 3 votes and stack the deck in your favor. But I mean, hey, you're giving me money. I want to, give you something for your contribution. If you donated $1 or more, then you can participate in both that vote and the everyone vote. And even if you didn't donate anything, you can still participate in one of the votes and maybe tip the scales in one direction or another. So, there are 40 games on this list. I'm going to try to go through them super quick. They are Abandoned Ship, A Castle Full of Cats, A Light in the Dark, Animal Lover, Another Tomorrow, A Tale for Anna, Axis Football 2023, Cavity Busters, Cramped Room of Death, Curse Crackers for Whom the Bell Toils, Go Go Pogo Girl, Homebody, Hoppy Hop, Hush Hush, Kana Quest, Lucy Got Problems, Marlin's Mystery, The Dark Side of Crime, Maximus 2, Murtop, Ninja Smasher, Overloop, Overshoot Battle Race, Patrick's Parabox, Proto-Droid Delta, Railway Islands Puzzle, Rooftop Renegade, Ruku's Heart Balloon, Seventh Lair, Startup Company Console Edition, Stay Out of the House, Super Ninja Miner, Terminal Velocity Boosted Edition, Terracotta, Terra Flame, The X-Crawlers, Undead Horde 2 Necropolis, Unidentified Falling Objects, Varney Lake, Velocity Noodle, and Venice 2089. And I cannot believe I got through all of that without making a single mistake. Yay me, pat on the head.
Okay. Not nearly as big of a list for the all-patron budget game vote, thank God. We have Alchemy Poi Poi SS, Brain On Dot Physics, Ghost Tea, Metadude, Rainbow Snake, and Road Bustle 2.
Hey, I think you got through that pretty okay, too.
I mean, the first one is a really weird title, as most of these budget games are.
Hey, at least this time I'm not including any games that have like a super long title with every word thrown in there so that it hits all of the search engines. I think I'm gonna try to make it a point to avoid those games going forward, because at this point, while I hate to discriminate a game based on its title, I feel like if it has a word salad title like that, it's pretty indicative that it's going to be a low effort game that they're just trying to get people to be tricked into buying.
Yeah.
People like me, apparently.
All right, let's talk about some of the highlights that eShopper reviews covered in August of 2023. As a note, these are not necessarily games released in the last month, but games reviewed that month. And we'll start by talking about the worst games.
Oh, been a while since you started with the worst games.
Yeah.
Are we going to the worst of the worst first, or are we going to the best of the worst?
Oh my goodness. Oh gosh. We'll just go from the top of the list.
Starting with the worst of the worst.
Oh, it is? Is it the worst? Ooh.
Yeah, I start with the worst at the top, and this is how I format my list. Do you want to go the other way then?
No, we can do this.
All right.
So, I guess the very worst of the worst is Chess Maiden.
Chess Maiden, it's a chess game. And I suppose technically you could consider it an ecchi game, although there's no nudity or anything in it.
Why is it an ecchi game?
Because the entire point of the game is that you are playing chess with a busty girl in a maid outfit sitting across from you.
Oh my.
Yeah. And, she's kind of an anime style girl. And here's the thing, as I often say with ecchi games or with porn games, however you want to call them, I try not to discriminate against them or in favor of them. I don't specifically like or dislike them. It's just a question of, is it a good game? And does all the sexy stuff, does it fit in with the game, or does it distract from the game? With this game, I'll start with the second question. does the sexy stuff fit in with the game, add to the game, or detract from it? And I have to say, I find it difficult to think that anyone's going to be getting super aroused by playing this game. The 3D made girl that you're playing against moves in a super robotic fashion. It's kind of almost a little creepy.
Is it like animatronic creepy?
Yeah, kind of.
No, thank you.
Like she has this motion that her head goes through where it's like hitting 3 points, or her eyes rather, bouncing between 3 points, and it never stops. It's not like she looks like she's considering her options. It clearly looks like I said, it looks like animatronics or something.
No thanks.
And like I said, there's no nudity or anything. If someone's like, ooh, I get to play against a sexy naked lady. Nope, not even that. Okay, so the maiden part kind of seems like it's not really worth it. How about the chess part? Surely the chess at least must be decent. I mean, it's chess. How could you mess up chess? Well, they do. They absolutely do, in multiple ways. First of all, Jen, I imagine you're probably not terribly familiar with chess. I mean, you're at least loosely familiar with it. Am I guessing correctly?
Yeah.
Do you know what castling is in chess?
No, I don't.
For our listeners, if you are not familiar with the rules of chess, castling is a specific move that you can do if you have a king that has never moved at all on the board and a rook that has not moved, and if there are no pieces in between those two. If you've removed the pieces in between the two, you've taken them out, whatever, you can do a one-time only move in your game where you can take your king and move them 2 spaces toward the rook, and then take the rook and move them opposite the king. Basically, they jump over the king. It's not something you can do at any other time. It is a one-time only thing, but it's really important for defending your king. It helps you to get your king away from the center where they could be hit from all sides by checks. It is a standard move in chess. It is in every single chess video game, except this one for some reason. They don't have a standard chess move in a chess video game. And I was flabbergasted that this would be the case. It gets better. When you're playing against your opponent, she takes forever to move. She spends literal minutes thinking. It gets worse. This game doesn't have a lot of features, like you can't undo moves. It doesn't give you any tutorials or anything. So I would hope that you would be a decent chess player to play this, because if you are just starting out in chess, you won't have a clue what to do. I do have a clue what to do, and I got to the point where I was clearly winning, and I was making things difficult for my made opponent. And I realized after I had made a move that I was 2 moves out from check. 1 or 2 moves out. I can't recall specifically which. And the computer player, the AI, the maid, must have realized this too, because she tried everything she could to get out of it, despite that there were no possible paths. For example, she tried to move another piece even though her king was in check. And yeah, the rules of chess don't allow that. And thankfully the game recognized that too and told her basically, no, you can't do that. You're in check. You got to move your king or put something in the way of whatever's checking it. So she found another solution to ensure that she would not lose the game. She just refused to make another move.
Oh my goodness.
And this version of the game doesn't have any clock. It doesn't have any way to force a move. So because I was about to win a game of chess, in this chess game, the AI opponent decided to basically stick up their nose, say, no, not having it, and refused to let me continue. Just sat there, with her eyes darting to the 3 positions over and over again for all eternity. Yeah, do not buy this game. It is bad in every possible way.
Unless you want to play against an immature little girl AI. Okay. Yeah. Next up is Kart Crazy Race Simulator game.
Despite the title, and despite that you are technically racing in a cart, like a small vehicle cart kind of thing, This doesn't really play like a kart racing game. It's more like an arcade-style racing game.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a racing game where the graphics are terrible and there is absolutely zero nuance to the gameplay. It's really boring. You're just driving. And there's also some unpredictability in the physics. Whenever you turn, it's not clear if this is a turn where you're going to lose control or it's going to go faster or slower than you want. And I just could not get... I could not draw a bead on the physics in this game. It just didn't click with me at all. And even though I was spinning out in every corner because the physics are so bad, the AI was so bad and the game was so simple that I quickly recovered and easily won every race. And granted, that's on the default difficulty, but it's like, if the game has to change the conditions so that it can even have a chance of winning, that's not good. There's so many good racing games on the Nintendo Switch, and I'm glad I can say that now. It used to be that wasn't the case. There weren't good racing games on the Switch, but now there are tons of them, so there's absolutely no reason to play this one.
Okay. Next up is Hidden Bunny.
This was one of our patron-voted games for the month, and this is a hidden object game where you are scrolling around a 3D environment looking for all of one type of thing, like, you're looking for all the bunnies or something. It's okay in that respect, but the problem is it has one location, and that's it. And when you find all of the bunnies, and there's no timer or anything, it's not like you can try and beat your best time or something, then it's like, okay, you want to find something else in this location now? How about something else in this same location? I suppose I could see how maybe a young child might find this amusing, but it's like there are better games that play like this, and this is so monotonous and boring. I would say, they definitely don't get this one.
Steal It.
Don't have too much to say about Steal It. Steal It is a pretty straightforward, challenging platformer style game. The gameplay isn't great. It's basically you're running in, you got to get a treasure, the entire level transforms into a more difficult version of itself, and then you have to go all the way back. And the get to the treasure part is usually so snooze-inducingly easy, you kind of wonder why they don't just stick with the escape part. And every time you die, you have to go through it again from the beginning. It's pointless. Again, you have better options on the Switch.
Q-Bite Classics Thunderbolt Collection by Pico.
So this is a collection of 2 unlicensed shmup titles that were never previously released in the US, and that's kind of cool. But apart from the novelty of the fact that you couldn't previously own these games, neither of them is a really good shmup. So unless you're a collector, there's not really a point to get this. Get any of the countless better shmups on the Nintendo Switch.
Okay. Moving on to the hidden gems.
All right.
We have Wildflowers.
Wildflowers is kind of interesting. This is a game where it's kind of in the same realm of games as Stardew Valley and Harvest Moon. But what's interesting about it is that more so than those other games, this is one that is really strongly focused on the story. Like, in a average day in this game, you might not be doing a heck of a lot of farming in this farming game. Mm-hmm. And while that's a bit different and unusual, and the story isn't like super compelling, it's kind of a low level, like, you are secretly a witch in this town and being taught by your grandma how to do witchy stuff. And some of the other villagers are secretly witches and they're afraid of being discriminated against by their more straight-laced neighbors. And, so you're trying to do favors for people in the town while also hiding the fact that you're a witch. And, it's a cutesy story, nothing super involved or anything. But it's an interesting take on the genre. It has this kind of nice feel to it, this really mellow mood to it that works very well for it. And honestly, I'd say if you are a fan of this genre and want to try something that approaches it from a different angle, Wildflowers is well worth trying out.
Okay. Sounds cozy.
Yeah. That seems to be a word that I hear bouncing a lot these days, is cozy, but it fits here.
Okay, this next one makes me jump just because of the name. Next one up is Proto-Corgi.
Proto-Corgi. Oh, Jen is gleeing right now.
It's a corgi.
Jen loves her corgis.
I do.
It is a shmup where you're playing a cutesy little kind of pixel art corgi. This corgi is trying to save its master after being kidnapped and going through the galaxy and blasting away enemies with it's got kind of like an Astro Boy sort of feel to it, where it has like these guns that pop out and everything. It's very cutesy. The enemies you fight are cutesy. It's just got a really good overall presentation. And while I wouldn't say that this is an exceptional entry in the genre, it's a good one. And so if you feel like you might enjoy a good shmup with a really adorable presentation, yeah, Proto-Corgi is definitely worth giving a look.
Next up is Fishing Vacation.
Fishing Vacation really surprised me. This is one of the patron-voted games for the month. And you don't really expect much from the patron-voted games, I've got to admit. I've never really, like, some of them rise to the top and are actually decent, but this one, it has this aesthetic where it looks like a classic black and white Game Boy style game.
Okay.
And, you know, you can even use little Game Boy color filters on it and stuff to change its colors.
Mm-hmm.
And at least at first, this might seem a little like kind of a really cute, very, very simple fishing game. But that's not really telling the whole story, because this game is actually a horror game.
Or a fishing game?
Yeah, and it's not hiding it. Like, right from the start, it's pretty clear that that's the direction it's going to be going. Here's the thing. You are going to a friend's, like, grandfather's or uncle's house or something like that, or cabin in the woods next to the lake.
Of course it's a cabin in the woods.
Yeah. And as you're fishing, you know, mysterious events happen. There's brief flashes of some creature hiding off in the distance, or a claw reaches up from the depths to grab the thing that you're fishing for. And this is a game that the fishing isn't particularly great. It's very, very simple. And the horror elements aren't really all that scary because, I mean, it's all in that black and white Game Boy style art style.
Right.
But because it's kind of like trying for scary and failing a little, as a result of that, it's kind of adorable.
What? Okay.
Oh, come on. It's like, picture a little kid dressed up in a bedsheet trying to look like a ghost going, boo, boo,
Okay.
I scared you.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, that's this game in a nutshell. I'm not sure if I'd go as far as to say that it's family friendly, because it is kind of dealing with some gruesome elements, but it is delivering those elements to the player in such a way where it's like, I highly doubt that you will be scared by this game, but I feel like there's a good chance you will be charmed by it at least.
Mm-hmm.
And for $2, I think it's unique enough and interesting enough that it's worth a try. It's a very unique experience.
Okay, last one for this category is Verdict Guilty.
Verdict Guilty has an issue that you kind of feel like maybe it might be a bit tone deaf compared to the issues we have going on in today's culture. The premise behind this game is it's kind of a cops versus criminals style game in a Street Fighter style like fighting game, where the cops have a special move where they can slap a pair of handcuffs on an opponent and then beat the crap out of them while they're wearing handcuffs.
Oh no.
Now,
oh god, no.
That's just it is. If you're the kind of person who is triggered by police abuse and that kind of stuff, yeah, this game does have some problematic elements. However, within the world of this game, it seems like I couldn't help but feel like all the handcuffs in this game must be made out of brittle plastic because criminals tend to break out of them pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And the various characters can also use guns and stuff, and it's not like a gunshot will kill someone in this game. It ends up being a pretty cute and pretty fun old school style Street Fighter style game. I wouldn't put this up with the best games in the genre. It's not even close to that, but it is enjoyable. It's fairly inexpensive. You just gotta look past those problematic elements if you want to enjoy it. And I can understand how some people wouldn't feel comfortable with that, and that's fine. But if that's the kind of thing that doesn't seem like it would bother you, you might want to give this a try if you're a fan of fighting games.
All right, so on to the noteworthy reviews.
Okay.
We have Oxenfree 2 Lost Signals.
This was also one of the patron-voted games for this month. And I could have included this in with the hidden gems. I'm not sure that it was too terribly hidden because it was featured in multiple Nintendo Indie Directs.
Okay.
And on top of that, while I very much did enjoy this game, I was also a little disappointed in it because I didn't feel like it had the same spark that the original game did.
Mm-hmm.
It still is a very good graphic adventure style game with kind of this paranormal mystery that you're trying to uncover.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the same paranormal mystery that was present in the first game. And if you played through the first game, which I highly recommend, then you kind of already have a feel for what's going on here. And I think the game knows it because it kind of rushes to tell you what's going on pretty early into the game. So the question isn't so much what's going on, but how is it happening this time? What are the players involved trying to do? What's changed this time around? And that isn't quite as enticing as the big mystery of what the heck is going on that was present in the first game.
Mm-hmm.
And on top of that, the first game had a cast of characters that you would constantly run into as you were running around this island in that game.
Mm-hmm.
And it made for some interesting interconnected dynamics between the characters. This game doesn't do that, and instead it has one supporting character who's joining you most of the time, at least early in this game.
Mm-hmm.
And while I do feel like that has some potential to more deeply explore the dynamics between these two characters, honestly, I wasn't terribly compelled by either of the two main characters in this game. Your main character is kind of a little bit of a jerk, I guess I would say.
Ooh.
And her coworker is kind of eager to please and a bit of a... I don't know how to describe it. In any case, I still think this is a very good game. I still think it has a lot going for it, and it's an interesting evolution of the art style that was present in the first game. But I just feel like if you've never played the first game, definitely play the first game first. If you have played the first Oxenfree, you might want to play this one too. It's good. It does a good job following up what was present in the original, but don't expect lightning to strike twice.
All right. Next up is Smash Out.
This was another patron-voted game. And at this point, you might be noticing that I have a lot of patron-voted games in this list.
Mm-hmm.
And that is because I don't do this all the time. But last month, when I had 2 games tying in the main vote and 3 games tying in the secondary vote, the budget vote,
Mm-hmm.
I ended up reviewing all of them.
Oh, wow. How generous of you.
I know. I'm super nice. Smash Out, for $1, it's an okay time waster. It's basically you're throwing balls at blocks and trying to knock the blocks off of a platform. And for what it's worth, it's fine. It's not anything particularly original or super interesting, but it gets the job done. For $1, if you're looking for a time waster, this is fine.
All right. So, we'll move on to the best games.
Yes.
Starting with Pikmin 4.
Now, this is one you actually played.
Yes, it was very cute. I'm still deciding on whether or not I should get it myself.
Mm-hmm.
Currently, because I'm playing Baldur's Gate.
Yeah, you're going to be busy with that for a while.
Oh, for a long while. But anyway, back to Pikmin 4.
So, Pikmin 4, while I wouldn't say it's definitively the best game in the series, it probably edges out all 3 of its predecessors to become the best game in the series. It is, like all of its predecessors, it is visually stunning. It has a great look to it. I think it is definitely the most user-friendly game in the series. Unlike prior games in the series, you don't have a day limit where if you pass that limit, your character's going to die due to lack of oxygen or something.
Mm-hmm.
You have a helper character, this little dog named Ochi.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're an Ochi fan?
Oh, yes, he's adorable.
I do think I'm a little disappointed that the great co-op that was present in Pikmin 3 on the Nintendo Switch, I think it was Pikmin 3 Deluxe, is no longer present here, unfortunately.
No, the co-op leaves very much to be desired.
Yeah, this game has kind of an asymmetrical co-op. I forget what they call it, like an assist mode, or I've heard some people derisively refer to it as girlfriend mode, which that has some negative connotations.
Just a bit.
But basically, it is not a full partnership between two players.
No, it's not. And honestly, unless you're like sleepy or tired, I wouldn't even try the co-op mode.
Yeah, it's not a difficult game.
No.
It's just a matter of gathering up your troops, exploring the environment. But here's the thing. While it's not especially challenging, it is a delight to play. It's fun to explore. It's cool to see what hidden treasures you'll find around the corner or what new Pikmin you'll dig up. They have kind of an interesting night mode where you are playing. It's kind of a little like a tower defense almost.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fine. I would say it's kind of more of a distraction rather than a big feature. But just the core game itself is so good. The Dandori battles, I forgot all about that, where you are challenging this other player or this other computer-controlled player to try and get the most stuff before a time limit finishes. Those are great, and I love that they added that as a two-player competitive mode in this game.
Mm-hmm.
And you and I are going to have to throw down in that mode at some point,
At some point, yeah.
Although I feel like, I don't know if you'll beat me there.
Okay, so I'm one of the few people that really did not know what Pikmin was about.
Oh.
And I think a lot of people probably don't know what Pikmin is about because the last game released about 10 years ago.
Oh, yeah, it's been ages since... technically, we had Pikmin 3 Deluxe a few years ago on Nintendo Switch, but that was a remake or a re-release of the Wii U game.
Right.
And then prior to that, we had Hey Pikmin on the Nintendo 3DS, and the less said about that, the better. And I suppose there's also Pikmin Bloom on mobile devices, but, if we're talking about mainline Pikmin games, like actual Pikmin games, yeah, this is the first one that we've gotten in 10 years. And man, it's great.
I honestly just thought of the Pikmin games as like, oh, it's cute, and some reason you have all these little plant-like things. Mm-hmm. So if you aren't familiar with this game, I would describe it as a puzzle game that makes organizing and making tasks fun. It's a very niche game.
I kind of look at it like, I feel it's a real-time strategy game where you are controlling one of the characters in amongst his troops.
Ah, okay, that is one way to look at it. Mm. But yeah, you're basically just directing your Pikmin to do certain tasks. Yeah, and it's cute.
Definitely my favorite game this month, although there were some really strong contenders this month, as you're about to see.
All right, so next up is Vampire Survivors.
This game made a huge splash on, I think it was PC and mobile devices last year. Actually, I think Xbox might have gotten it too. And it finally got ported to Nintendo Switch, and I can definitely see why so many people love it. Now, here's the thing. If this was a full-price game, I might feel a little differently about it because it is somewhat simple in how you play it. Mm-hmm. But this is a $5 game. And for the price of $5, you're getting a lot of game here. The idea is, you are controlling this character. Like, a lot of the characters and enemies in this game look like they were pulled straight out of the Castlevania series, which is kind of this cute motif that I really appreciate. But you're moving them around from a top-down perspective, and these characters automatically attack just on a regular basis, like every few seconds, or it varies depending on the weapon. Mm-hmm. And so you're not actively attacking, you're trying to move your character to avoid enemies, to gather pickups, and A lot of the strategy in this game is, number one, how you move, number two, where you go, and number three, how you upgrade your character as they level up and gain upgrades. Over time, you can build your character up to be this mega powerhouse who's doing tons of damage to everything on the screen. And it is loads of fun building up your character like this. Nintendo Switch got a new 4-player mode, and I'm not sure how well that fits this style of game, especially because it divides all of the upgrades between the players. So it's going to take you longer to get your character powered up, and you kind of feel tethered to the other character as a result of that. I think it's a nice addition, but I think the single player is still the main point of this game. But again, for $5, yeah, this is, I would almost consider this a must-buy just because it is so inexpensive and so fun.
Okay. Tents and Trees.
Tents and Trees is a puzzle game that plays a little bit like Picross, but it's not Picross. It has its own rules. The basic idea is there are a bunch of trees on your grid, and every tree must be adjacent either to its left or right or top or bottom to a tent. And tents, number one, there must be one tent for every tree. Number two, no tent can be adjacent to any other tent. That's all the rules.
Okay.
And based on that, and each row and column tells you how many tents are in that row, you're kind of having to guess where to place stuff. Simple, but it can definitely be tricky to figure out where things go. And I think they do a good job of explaining the rules in this game. The controls work well. The aesthetic is very calming and relaxing. It's really great. And when you make a mistake in this game, it shows you not only what the mistake is, but how you should have figured that out. Like, it has a really good hint system here, better than just about any game of this kind that I've seen. Between the ton of content that this game has, the great presentation, the way everything works just how you want it to in this style of game, everything in this game is done just right. And even though it's not super inventive, this style of puzzle has been around for like a decade at least. I haven't seen it on the Nintendo Switch previous to this, and it's done so well here. Yeah, if you enjoy puzzle games, absolute must buy for this one. It is wonderful.
All right. Last up for this category is Theater Rhythm Final Bar Line.
I love the Theater Rhythm series. While most of the games in this series have focused primarily on music from the Final Fantasy games. Technically, there was a Dragon Quest one that I don't think we got here in America, but otherwise, the primary focus of these games has been doing a music rhythm game with Final Fantasy music being the music. And for anyone who's played games in the Final Fantasy series, that series has amazing music.
Yes.
Final Bar Line does a few things that are a little different than its predecessors, and that's mainly due to the platforms it finds itself on. I believe this game came out on Switch and I want to say PlayStation 4. And unlike the Nintendo 3DS, which the previous games came out on, people might be playing this game without using a touchscreen. So it really had to work out getting the controls right using a standard, traditional gamepad controls. And I think that works really well here. They did a good job of it. I'm actually kind of a little disappointed in this game for removing touchscreen controls entirely, because Nintendo Switch does still have a touchscreen.
Yeah.
But I can see why they did it, because the gameplay this time around, a part of the focus is on sometimes you're having to do two things at once. Like you're having to move two sticks in different directions, or you're having to press two buttons at the same time. And when it uses that, I'd say that's when this game is at its best, when it's really having you kind of multitasking. On top of that, the music in this game is expanded to include pretty much every Final Fantasy game up through Final Fantasy 15. So the most recently released Final Fantasy 16 isn't present here, but up through until 15. And that includes the Final Fantasy 7 remake. That includes all of the little mobile games that have come out, all the little side games and spin-offs. And If you go into, there's one mode where you can just choose individual songs. There's also a ton of other games from Square Enix that are included here. Like if you want to play songs from Chrono Cross or Nier Automata, or, there's Live Alive. That's another one that came out recently. The Octopath Traveler games. There's music from those here. And there is such a huge, absolute wealth of amazing music in this game. And the music rhythm gameplay works out well. If you're a fan of music rhythm, I'd say this is a no-brainer.
All right. So, housekeeping.
Yes.
Nintendo Switch Online August 2023 release for Game Boy and Nintendo 64 include Pokemon, the trading card game, and Pokemon Stadium 2. Ooh, I love those games.
Really?
Pokemon Stadium, yes.
These games were announced, and I think they were released the same time as a Pokemon Direct that came out this last month. And it's a good thing that they did, because that was the only darn thing of interest that was in that Pokemon Direct. It was really bad. The games, I have mixed feelings about. So, like with the original Pokemon Stadium 2 has a major problem, which is the centerpiece of those games when they were released on the Nintendo 64 was you had a transfer pack accessory that you could plug into your controller and then pop one of the Game Boy games into that, and you could play your Pokemon in full 3D in the game. You could use it to challenge opponents.
That's right.
But the Nintendo Switch doesn't have any of that.
No.
And they haven't worked any of that functionality into the game. It's not like you can take your Pokemon out of, Pokemon Sword and Shield or Pokemon Scarlet and Violet and play them in this. None of that is present here, which means that the biggest part of Pokemon Stadium is kind of pointless here. And what that leaves is just the mini games, which, to be fair, the mini games in this are actually pretty good.
Oh.
Unlike the first Pokemon Stadium. I thought the Pokemon Stadium, the mini games in the first one were just awful. This time around, pretty much all of them are worth playing. So if you want a brief distraction with some good mini games, yeah, Pokemon Stadium 2 is worth trying.
Okay.
The other game in this pairing is Pokemon the Trading Card Game, and I feel like this is a game that did its darndest within its limitations at the time. The Game Boy screen, the screen of the original Game Boy, was just so small that trying to cram a bunch of information onto that screen, is not an easy task.
No.
And this game does as admirable a job as you could expect trying to do that, but by today's standards, it's like, well, I want to see what this card does. Really, I have to move the cursor over and do a bunch of stuff to see it, and then it hides everything else on the screen, so if I want to compare, and yeah, it's not the greatest. And I feel like, honestly, I would love to see a modern Pokemon trading card game on the Nintendo Switch that makes full use of the touchscreen and all the different elements on it. But we don't have that here. We have a Game Boy game that's really, really struggling with its limitations.
All right, next up is Nintendo Switch Online Expansion Pack August 2023, released for Nintendo 64, which includes Excite Bike 64.
I cannot talk too much about this one because as we are recording this podcast, this game hasn't come out yet. I played the original way back in the day, but if I'm perfectly honest, I don't remember much about it. I remember it being good. I seem to recall liking it, but I'm not sure how well it has aged. I'm not sure how the port to Nintendo Switch has gone, so this might be one I'll just have to talk about next month.
Have you heard that Charles Martinet is stepping down from his role voicing characters for Nintendo?
Why, yes, Jen, I have heard that.
I didn't.
Well, you did when I told you.
Yeah, well, it was not on my radar.
For those who are not aware, Charles Martinet has voiced Mario, Luigi, Wario, and Waluigi in Nintendo games since Super Mario 64. That is over 2 decades that he has voiced those 4 characters consistently for Nintendo. They have not had any other voice actors performing those characters, save for one exception. the Super Mario Brothers movie. They had Chris Pratt voicing Mario and Charlie Day voicing Luigi.
Okay, now I can understand why people were upset that they didn't invite him over to...
Well, technically, Charles Martinet did voice characters in that movie.
Oh, he did.
There's one scene very early into the movie where Mario and Luigi are showing off this commercial that they filmed for their plumbing business.
Oh.
And this other kind of old school looking plumber guy, you know, Mario and Luigi are asking themselves, does this look too stereotypical? And this other plumber guy goes, no, it's great. And that was Charles Martinet doing his classic Mario voice.
I see.
And then later in the movie, there's this scene where Mario and Luigi are eating dinner with their family. And I believe their father is also voiced by Charles Martinet with a less stereotypical voice.
Yeah.
Charles Martinet also has done some other things that people might not expect. For example, in the game Skyrim, he voices the dragon Parthenax.
Wow,
the
talk
one
about range.
I know, right? The one good dragon in that game.
Mm-hmm. And
that is really unexpected coming from the "It's a me" guy.
Mm-hmm.
There's this movie called The Game where, if memory serves, Charles Martinet plays the father of Michael Douglas's character in flashbacks who jumps off a roof. And yeah.
Oh, wow.
So not a speaking role in that movie.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm old. And I remember back in the day, before Super Mario 64, when people thought of Mario, you thought of the Mario... When you think of his voice, you would think of the Mario from the Super Mario Brothers Super Show,
sure,
who had a gruff voice because he was voiced by Lou Albino, the wrestler. And then, of course, you had the absolutely terrible Super Mario Brothers movie.
Let's not even talk about it. Let's not.
Where he was portrayed by Bob Hoskins. And of course, the one thing that everybody points to is that these guys, what they had in common was a big, deep, gruff voice. And, you know, I sound like I come from Brooklyn because that's the background for this character. And apparently, when they were trying to search for someone to portray Mario in the games, they were auditioning people. Actually, Martinet voiced Mario prior to the video games when they were looking for a special presentation for E3. They had this one presentation where Mario's head would be depicted in 3D and it would be mapped to match a performer's face as they performed in real time.
Oh.
So, you know, when you open your mouth to speak, the little character's mouth would speak. And so they wanted someone to attend E3 behind the scenes to react to showgoers who would look at the screen, they'd see a 3D depiction of Mario, and they go, oh, that's cool. It's like, oh, thank you very much. I'm glad you think I'm a cool. You know, kind of make it an interactive thing.
Uh-huh.
And so they were trying to hire someone to voice Mario for that, and not just voice, but also perform Mario. And apparently they were getting a lot of actors who were looking at, you know, the previous iterations of Mario and going for the deep voice and that kind of thing. And apparently, Charles Martinet in interviews was talking about this, and he was saying, I felt like I wanted to go a different direction, and, you know, I wanted him to be, you know, he's a bouncy character, so I wanted him to be light and bouncy and cheerful. And apparently the fact that he was so wildly different from everyone else kind of clicked with the character and really impressed Nintendo's personnel. So they hired him for this job at E3, where, you know, everybody's walking past, oh, hey, thank you for coming to Nintendo's booth. Nice to see you, Matt Casanasina, or, you know, whatever. You actually address people by name if he recognized them.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah.
And I guess when they decided to make their massive jump into 3D with Super Mario 64, and they knew that they wanted to have Mario to be voiced, it must have been a natural conclusion for them to go, well, the one guy we've been most pleased with who voiced this character, you know, over the many years that people have been trying was this guy who worked for us back at E3, and yeah, let's just get him again. Mm-hmm. And it's become such an iconic voice that, I mean, you've had multiple Princess Peaches, multiple voice actors voicing that character. You have had multiple voice actors voicing the character of Toad. You have had multiple people voicing Bowser. You know, that character who in most games just goes, Grah!
Yeah.
Yeah, they've had multiple people voicing that. But over the last 2+ decades, one consistent voice for Mario, for Wario, for Waluigi, kind of for Luigi. In the earliest games where Luigi appeared, they just pitched up Mario's voice. They didn't try to make it sound different. They just made it lighter. And I can't recall which game it was, but at some point they were like, Luigi should probably have a different voice. And so Charles Martinet provided that voice too, with the, oh, hey, let's go.
He will definitely be missed, I think.
You know, it's going to be tough to fill his shoes, but I also feel like he has built up such a iconic character, an iconic representation of that character, that he has really laid the groundwork for voice actors to come after him. And it's funny because prior to this announcement, which Nintendo announced on X, formerly known as Twitter.
Oh.
Yep. Prior to this, when Nintendo revealed Super Mario Bros. Wonder, people were kind of looking at a bit askance, going, I think that might not be Charles Martinet. The voice sounds kind of different. And that opinion had divided people on the internet. Some people were like, no, that's him. Other people are like, no, that definitely sounds like listen to this syllable here. It sounds totally different.
Oh my
well,
goodness.
Apparently those people who were like, oh, my ears detect something different. Apparently they were right, because that is going to be the first game with Mario in it to not feature Charles Martinet's voice. It's going to have a completely different voice actor. Not sure who that is, but it'll be a new era. And Martinet's getting old, and he's not going to be able to voice that character forever. It's just not happening. So this is going to happen eventually, but this definitely feels like a passing the torch moment. Like when you have a character like Mickey Mouse or Bugs Bunny or Kermit the Frog, when the person who's been portraying that character for decades is aging out of the role, you know, it is kind of a big deal with anyone who follows that particular franchise. And I feel like this is one of those moments.
Yeah.
However, you disagreed with me when I suggested that.
Well, okay. So the background that you just gave, okay, for one, I was under the impression that he only voiced Mario.
Oh.
I did not know that he voiced other characters. So that gives me a wealth of understanding.
Yep. You got the, it's me, Mario.
So now that I know.
It's me, Luigi. Ha ha ha.
Yeah.
It's me, Wario.
Nice impressions.
Thank you. I do try. They should totally hire me, right?
I mean, maybe? I
Come on, Nintendo. You got potential money to be made here.
Oh my goodness.
I'm totally going to rake in. Everybody's going to go buy the games because I'm in it, right?
Uh-huh. No, now that you, gave that big old history about Chris Martinet, I'm very impressed.
Charles Martinet.
Oh, Charles Martinet, my goodness. I'm impressed. I'm a little bit sad that he's retiring, but apparently he's going to remain an ambassador, so. Yeah,
I'm not entirely sure what that means exactly, but I'm guessing that's kind of like he's going to be working as PR for Nintendo, just going to events and stuff. Like, hey, I used to voice Mario. It's good to see you. Want to try out the new game we have on demo here? You know, it's like, I understand maybe doing that voice is starting to grate on his vocal cords or something. It's
possible. It's very possible.
But it's nice that they still have him involved. It's nice that, he's a piece of video game history at this point.
Yep.
You know, and for them to still be giving him a role in that, even as he's aging out of being able to do what he's been doing, I'm bittersweet about the whole thing. It's something that had to happen eventually, and I'm sad that that's the case, but this seems like the softest way for it to happen.
So, lately, I've been enamored with a certain game.
A certain game that you might have mentioned earlier in this very podcast, even?
You mean Baldur's Gate 3?
Do you mean Baldur's Gate 3?
Of course I mean Baldur's Gate 3.
So, before we go on, we should stress, as of this recording, there's been no announcement made that Baldur's Gate 3 is coming to Nintendo Switch, and it seems pretty unlikely that it will come to Nintendo Switch. It is pretty
intense on the specs.
Yeah. But there's always a possibility that it could come to Nintendo Switch's successor whenever that's announced.
Mm-hmm.
However, there was a topic that came up in regards to the release of this game that seemed like it's more wide-ranging and applies to video games in general. So,
well, okay, so before we talk about that little controversy, for those that aren't familiar with Baldur's Gate 3, it is, if you've played Divinity Original Sin, it's very similar to that game in terms of game mechanics and camera view.
Or Divinity 2, which actually did come out on Nintendo Switch and is a very, very good port. And if you like RPGs, you should absolutely play it.
Yeah, so it's an RPG, and Baldur's Gate uses the 5th edition D&D rules. More or less pretty much the same. Some things like grappling aren't in the game, but that's basically what Baldur's Gate is about. And it's amazing.
Oh yeah, everybody is singing the praises of this game.
It's amazing.
For my part, I have not yet played this game, but I assume that the people who are just saying all sorts of wonderful things about it, I assume that it probably is, because so many people, like, I've yet to hear anyone go, nah, I couldn't get into it. Which is funny, because even games like Elden Ring and Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, I occasionally hear people going, it's just not for me.
Mm-hmm.
Have yet to hear anyone saying that in regards to Baldur's Gate 3.
So the controversy, which I think the people who are turning their noses at the game can just stuff it, they're lamenting about how Baldur's Gate is, breaking the standards or something?
So this, as far as I can tell, started with a series of tweets or X's. I don't know what we're calling them now.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. From Zalavier, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, Nelson, Zalavier Nelson Jr., who is the head of developer Strange Scaffold, who developed Space Warlord Organ Trading Simulator and El Paso Elsewhere. And... Okay.
I've never heard of these games.
They're indie games.
Okay, go on.
I'm not going to go through the whole quote. I'm just going to say a few pieces of it. But it starts, like a lot of people, I'm deeply excited about what the lovely folks at Larian accomplished with Baldur's Gate 3, but I want to gently, preemptively push back against players taking that excitement and using it to apply criticism to a quote-unquote raised standard to RPGs going forward. And later on in that thread he says, in an era of mega games, Baldur's Gate 3 is one of the largest attempted, built by a specialized group of people using mature tech specially built to make this specific game, reinforced by invaluable mass player feedback and market validation ahead of its launch. This is not a new baseline for RPGs. This is an anomaly. Now, other game studio developers and employees have chimed in agreement with this quote. There are a bunch of them, but just as one example, I picked out a small quote from Diablo 4 senior designer Chris Balser. People too often only look at the fruits of labor and not at the labor itself, kind of chiming in on top of that. So now I've been talking for a while and you've heard those quotes directly. What are your thoughts, Jen?
Again, they can just shove it. D&D has been around far longer than a lot of these other RPGs. And to say that they're doing something like an anomaly or whatever, I don't think it's an anomaly. I think it's just using the convenience and technology of games to make it easier to enjoy Dungeons and Dragons.
So I was telling you before, and I haven't really revealed my full opinion on this to you, that I have a more nuanced take on this.
Go ahead.
But before I say that, I'm going to give you one more quote, And this is from Larian Studios themselves, who commented on this. This is from their founder, Sven Vink. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And Sven, now I'm not sure, says, the problem I have with the use of the word standards is this is video games. Standards just die every day. Things get reinvented. New things appear all the time. When I was starting out in the industry, Assassin's Creed set the new standard. It was over. Nobody could make games like Assassin's Creed. There was just too much budget behind it. That was going to be the future. Everybody had to consolidate, blah, blah, blah. That didn't materialize. In video games, there's so much free space to explore still in the creative tree.
Yes.
Now, here's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
I can see what the initial concern being expressed by, in particular, Zalavier, I'm so sorry, I don't know which way this name is pronounced, Zalavier Nelson. In that original quote, I can kind of see the concern being espoused by this individual, which is, when I said, oh, this is a guy from a company that developed Space Warlord Organ Trading Simulator, and you're like, what the heck even is that? Well, that's just it is. Not every developer is a major AAA studio. But at the same time, I don't think we expect them to be.
So here's the thing that makes me just, chuckle darkly. Blizzard has supremely disappointed me these past 5 years. And we know how much money Blizzard as a studio has.
Yeah.
And your chair is squeaking so much. Yeah.
Sorry, I can't do much about it.
Uh-huh.
I don't know, maybe I could WD-40 it.
Maybe. But we all know how much money Blizzard Activision has. And they've just disappointed me so much. And I know they've disappointed a lot of people with Diablo 4, despite having so many people playing that game. I don't understand why they've disappointed so many fans of Overwatch, too. They've made me so livid. And seeing the reviews on Steam makes me livid, too, because they had so much time to prove to their player base that they could do a good job. My point is, I understand the limitations that maybe an indie studio has to make a great game that breaks standards. But at the same time, you have these gigantic studios with money and investors that aren't delivering.
So, to this I will say, number one, okay, the concern that, well, not every studio has the budget or the staff that Larian Studios has. Well, yeah, but we don't expect some small studio to come up with a game like Baldur's Gate 3. So I think that's a false equivalency right there, number one. Mm-hmm. You know, the Zalavier Nelson, or whatever, however you pronounce his name, I'm
his
so
studio.
Sorry. We don't expect a guy like that to come up with a game like Baldur's 3. Mm-hmm. And so for people to be coming out of this quote thinking he thinks that there's that expectation of, nobody expects him to come up with a game like that. I don't think anyone expects even some companies like Nintendo to come up with a game like that, because that's not really the type of game they make.
No.
Nobody is saying that the new standard should be every game needs to be exactly like Baldur's Gate 3.
No, absolutely not.
I don't want my next Assassin's Creed game to be like Baldur's Gate 3. I don't want my next Mario game to be like Baldur's Gate 3. No. It would be crazy to think that. However, you made a very good point when you're talking about Diablo. Diablo, in many ways, is a lot like Baldur's Gate 3. Mm-hmm. It's not exactly the same thing. It's more action-focused. It's less technical. It's less plot-focused. But it's still in the same general area of type of game.
Sure.
And when Diablo 4 first released, again, I'm talking secondhand. I've not played this game myself. But just going off of what people were saying, off of reviews and everything, when it initially released, people were super pleased with it, thought it was great. And then they came out with a patch at some point later that pretty much everyone in the player base thought just ruined the game.
Yeah, I remember reading about that.
So that's one thing. Another thing is, people look at the AAA game space and they're like, it is so full of microtransactions and gross monetization and all sorts of bugginess. People release games like Cyberpunk years before they should actually be released.
Yeah.
Released without features that were advertised to have. Again, looking at Cyberpunk, No Man's Sky. All of these problems that people have now come to expect from the biggest game studios out there. And it's kind of ridiculous that these are the biggest game companies out there and they can't get their crap together.
No, they can't.
I mean, we can look at almost every major studio and we can find stuff like this. Nintendo can't get their Joy-Cons to stop breaking? What the heck? Bethesda, good job on Fallout 76. Great, just fantastic, making the biggest disaster in a long while.
Hence why my excitement, or lack of, for Starfield.
Yeah, that's just it is. As someone who focuses on Nintendo games, but I do play other things from time to time. I love the Elder Scrolls series, and I love Star Trek and stuff like that. And this looks like a great opportunity to combine those, but it's coming from Bethesda, and my faith in them has really dropped since the days of Skyrim.
Exactly.
So it could be really, really awesome, but I'm going to hold out and wait to see until after, probably a little while after that comes out, because you never know when these companies are going to add gross microtransactions and stuff into them after launch.
Yeah, for, cosmetics or whatever.
Now, here's the thing. When I hear people saying that Baldur's Gate 3 sets a new standard, I don't think that they're talking about in terms of exactly the way that this game does things. And I think that there is a general understanding that the way that this game adapts to every choice that you make to create a new story that goes off in the direction that you send it. At least that's as I understand it. That is something that is so difficult to pull off. It would be really unrealistic to expect every game to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that people look at this in terms of this is a high watermark in quality.
Mm-hmm.
That while it's not a perfect game, it's not without bugs as I understand it, it's still pretty lacking in bugs given how much is going on here. And again, Tears of the Kingdom was a lot like that too, where you would expect that game to be a lot buggier based on all the stuff that it does.
But it's so smooth.
The fact that it has zero gross monetization.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that it was released in a completed state. I don't think that it is unreasonable to expect video games to do these things. To not have gross monetization. To be released in a finished state. And when people talk about a new standard, it's kind of sad that would almost be considered a new standard, is games that aren't crap, basically.
So the way I see it is, I view it kind of as a piece of art that you buy.
Mm-hmm.
And each person or each studio or whatever is responsible for the piece of art that you buy and get to interact with as video games. I am so impressed by the art that Larian Studios made. Mm-hmm. And I don't expect that level of quality with other RPGs. I play RPGs that, are pixelated or whatever. It's just, this is what they have delivered. And it's beautiful. It's fun. It's funny. I am so amazed at how many choices you can make in this game and at the level of storytelling.
Now, one other thing that we should talk about in regards to this discussion is not just in terms of it being a finished game that doesn't have gross monetization, but also in terms of quality. They have clearly worked hard to make this the best version of itself that it could be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, in and of itself, that is something that it is perfectly fair to hold any video game to that standard.
Agreed.
Is this the best version of itself that it could be?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've heard one argument against this that I sort of agree a little with, but then mostly disagree with, and that is this. If you hold every game to that kind of standard, if you want every game to be as polished and well made as something like Baldur's Gate 3 or Tears of the Kingdom or whatever, then what you're doing is you're placing higher demands on the developers. You need to work more hours, you need to work harder, and that is just going to push game developers into abusing their employees more to try and live up to that standard. That is the argument that I've heard. And that is a compelling argument, save for one problem.
And that is?
Publishers are already doing that.
Yeah, they are.
So to say, oh, they're going to abuse the poor employees if we have to live up to these expectations, you know, that would mean a lot more if you weren't already abusing your employees. Activision Blizzard.
Yeah, and so many other big name studios.
That is one of the companies that jumped on this bandwagon, is jaw-dropping. That this company, known for sexually harassing its employees, for constantly dismissing the concerns of its customers, for having some of the nastiest business practices. A game for children, the Crash Team Racing game, after reviews were out for it, they snuck microtransactions into that game. What the heck, Activision Blizzard? It's like every kind of gross thing this company could do, they have done. And now they're playing the victim because somebody else made a better game than they could.
That's how I see it.
Didn't screw it up.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, we shouldn't be expected to do that. Yeah, you should. You have the budget. You have the talent. And maybe this is going to push you to work your employees harder. But the thing is, you're already doing that. So maybe you should learn how to do things the right way anyway.
Yep.
And we shouldn't have to just settle for worse products just so that you don't mistreat your customers. Pick a lane. Even if we only get one of those things, if we only get better games, or if we only get you don't treat your employees like trash, I would take one of those over neither of those. And that seems to be what Activision Blizzard is kind of giving us these days.
Yeah. I remember the earlier days of Blizzard. But anyway.
Yeah, they used to be, quote unquote, the good guys.
Not so much anymore. But
no.
On a lighter note, if anyone has a PC/console that's able to play Baldur's Gate 3 and you enjoy Dungeons and Dragons or just a really good RPG with amazing storytelling, please pick up Baldur's Gate 3. The studio has been amazing. They've delivered on so many great games over the decades. Please pick it up.
I take pleasure in the thought of it galling the heads of Activision Blizzard every time they see someone say, oh, Baldur's Gate 3 is way better than Diablo 4. It brings me glee to think that these jerks who are abusing their employees and taking advantage of their customers have to turn around and see themselves brought down, not even just by all the accusations against them, although really they should have had a greater comeuppance for that than they've had. But just for, like, even after all the abuse and horrible things that they've done, they still can't make a game quite as good as this other company that, at least as far as we can tell, seems to be on the up and up. And that's just it is. Well, we haven't heard anything that goes against that, but I mean, you never know. Cyberpunk was supposedly, CD Projekt Red was supposedly really, really great to their employees and never demanded overtime until we heard after the fact that, yeah, actually they demanded overtime a lot before Cyberpunk came out. Mm-hmm. So don't think that Larian Studios is a perfect angel here just because we haven't heard anything yet.
Yeah.
You don't know. Maybe they are, but maybe they're not. However, we definitely know that Activision Blizzard has been up to some really terrible crap.
Oh, yeah. Anyway, that wraps things up for this month's eShopper Reviews podcast. Again, we want to thank all of our patrons on Patreon for contributing. Patreon donors are the first ones to gain access to these podcasts, and if you're interested in becoming a donor, please check our Patreon page at patreon.com/eShopperReviews. And once again, if you're curious to read any of the reviews or content mentioned in this podcast, you can find all these posted free for all to access at no cost on our Patreon page. This has been Jen Ip.
And Jake McNeil.
We'll see you next month, and in the meantime, we both hope you found this content helpful and enjoyed some good games. Catch you all next time.
Let's go!